All right, so these notes are a quick overview of section 3, so you would know how to do electron configuration. So first thing is this off-bow principle. You're going to have to put this in your notes so that you can have it and use it. It should be something that's familiar from physical science, but if not, you just need to learn it, use it, put it off in the side in the margin. But yesterday we talked about how there are different sublevels. There's an S sublevel in the first shell, but then the second shell had S and P. And so if I start building this, because the third sublevel adds a D sublevel, and the fourth energy level has S, P, D, and F sublevels, right? As I continue with this pattern, oops, this is a 5, 5P, 5D, 6S, 6P. Oops, sorry, forgot the 5F. And then it goes 6D here. You don't actually need 6F because it just never is used, is what's going to happen. And then the seventh energy level only needs a P. You don't need a D sublevel for that. And we'll talk more on that later as we do more examples so that you know what's going on. But essentially, this is my order in which I'm going to fill sublevels. But you also have to look at this picture in a different way. You don't read it left to right, because after 3S is 3P, but you don't go to 3D after 3P. You actually end up going to 4S first and then come back up to 3D and then do 4P and then 5S. And then you go 4D, 5P, 6S. And then it's 4F, 5D, 6P, 7S. And then it's 5F, 6D, 7P. So the reason for that is that even though something has a 3, a 4, a 5 label, doesn't necessarily mean that it has a lower energy than something that has a higher number attached to it. All right? So this is just the way that it turns out to work. So you just have to understand that although I wrote that out left to right, I'm going to fill sublevels in order of lowest energy, and that makes it so that I go with a 4S before a 3D. I'm going to go with a 5S before a 4D. But I'm going to have to do 4D, 5P, 6S before I can get to 4F as well. So you just do what you have to do, but this is your general pattern that you're going to follow with off-bow principle. Pauli exclusion was technically in our quantum numbers, because there was the one that told us that, if you're going to have two electrons in the same orbital, they have to have opposite spin. So when I do orbital notation here in a second, it could look like this, but you can't do that, right? You can never have two electrons with the same spin pointed in the same direction. So both up or both down would be bad. They both always have to be opposite, one up, one down. Hund's rule tells me that if I have a sublevel, like a P sublevel, maybe a 2P sublevel that has electrons in it, if I only have 3 electrons in 2P, I need to actually spread them out before I can put any two together. So this is what it's supposed to look like, as opposed to I could have in my 2P put 2 electrons in here and then 1 here. That's not actually how it's supposed to work. So it's just a rule that you're going to follow, but it's also something that should be familiar, because if I have 2p3, that actually would be a nitrogen example, because nitrogen's 3 elements into the P block, and it's in that second energy level. But a long time ago in physical science, you probably made these Lewis dot structures where you put 1 dot on all 4 sides before you doubled up at the top. This is technically my 2s that has 2 electrons in it already, because I had to fill 2s before I could get to 2p over here, right? But in 2p, all 3 electrons are separate. They are individually occupying orbitals before you doubly occupy any. The other rule for Hund's rule is that all of these arrows had to point the same way. All of those single electrons are going to have the same spin state, so they're all up, or they could possibly all be down, depending on how your preference is. Because I don't really care how you do it. I just want you to be consistent. My first arrow is always pointing up, right? So if you want to do first arrow always pointing down, that's fine. I don't really care. But poly exclusion, they have to be opposite if there's two in there. If there's only one though, they should all be pointing the same way.